Welcome to Curious DK. Today we're going to address a question that seems to be coming up a lot. Why can't you delete notes you wrote in Nostr? Now there's a very simple reason, but in order to understand it, you need to understand the architecture of Nostr. So first I'm going to look at Twitter, which is a relatively similar equivalent, and we can see how easy it is to delete in Twitter. So you look at, this is my profile in Twitter. And you can see if I take a particular tweet that I wrote, I can go to the ... more, and there's a delete function right here. So it seems like that should be an easy enough thing to implement. And so you say, why can't we have such a thing in Nostr? And there's a good reason. So let's first confirm that that's the case. So here's my profile on Nostr. I'm using the Damus client on macOS. And if I go to a recent note that I wrote and I go to the same ... instead of seeing an option for delete, I see all these other options. So there's no delete. And you might say, why is there no delete? Did they forget about that feature? Is that something that could have been done and we just forgot about it or haven't gotten to it yet? And the answer is no. It actually is much more deeply tied to the architecture of what is Nostr. And so I wanted to explain it a little bit here. First, I want to explain the architecture of Twitter at a very high level because it will help us see the differences. So in Twitter, you're probably familiar with using Twitter from the mobile app. So you have a mobile phone, you have an app on your phone, and you downloaded that app from the App Store, logged in, and when you log in, you can then see all the stuff that you'd expect to see. And the way that works is your app is connecting to Twitter, the corporate server owned by Twitter, right? And that has, a front end or a mobile front end that is going to go talk to the Twitter database, which is fully contained inside Twitter. And then that database will respond back to the front end, and the front end will respond back to your mobile app on your phone. And because your tweet is contained within this database, if you ask Twitter to delete it, they'll just delete it, no problem. Now, that comes with its own trade-offs and downsides, which is if Twitter doesn't like you, if they don't like what you're saying, if they change their mind about their content policies, they can also choose to cut you off and stop returning tweets that you wrote because they are stored exclusively in the Twitter database. And so one of the things that Nostr seeks to solve, and it actually solves a bunch of problems, but one of the things it seeks to solve is to not be dependent on a corporate entity like Twitter in order to be able to have that same kind of publishing and subscription relationships that we have. This is the architecture for Nostr. And this one actually showed two different people. So there's one, and the second person is actually an ostrich. And that's just a little bit of a joke because in Nostr, we call ourselves nostriches. Instead of an ostrich using the second phone, you could imagine it's a person, or you could imagine that all the people you're talking to are ostriches. But you can see here in the Nostr ecosystem, I could download a Nostr client, and I can choose from any Nostr client I want. And then one of the properties of the Nostr ecosystem is that it's a protocol or an agreement for how we're going to communicate with each other, but it's not a platform. And so you can see there's no bubble or corporate entity that controls all of the stuff in the cloud here. And so that means that there's a lot more freedom. That means that nobody can suppress what you say. It means you have freedom to speak, and you have no corporate overlord who controls that. But it does mean that the architecture is different. So you can see here, if I have a Nostr client, I write out to relays. And these relays you could think of as roughly like databases. They have some other server logic, but this is relay 1. That might be operated by a hobbyist. This is relay 2. That could be operated by a big evil corporation. This is relay 3. Could be operated by a very friendly corporation. Maybe Damus is a corporation that chooses to run a relay. Maybe I would choose to run a relay, so the Curious DK relay. So anybody who wants can run them. You don't need anybody's permission to put it up. It's just a protocol. So think about a protocol being kind of like in the United States, we have kind of all agreed to drive on the right-hand side of the road. And so that's become the tradition, and all the roads and infrastructure is built with the assumption that we're all going to drive on the right-hand side of the road. It's not the only way you could drive. There's other places where you drive on the left-hand side of the road, but we have the protocol that we drive on the right. So this architecture is why the problem with deletion occurs, which is I'm this person, and I'm using this Nostr client, and I choose to write out to 3 different relays. And so you might think, oh, great. So if I want to delete, then let me just tell each of those 3 relays that I want it deleted. And that could do some of the deletion, but it doesn't give any real certainty or guarantee of deletion, because these relays may choose to talk to each other. Now, Nostr doesn't require it. The protocol or handshake of Nostr doesn't require that relays talk to each other. The relays could choose to pull in stuff that was not directly published to them. And the reason for that being that they want to have a more complete picture to serve their users better. So you can see that in the case of the ostrich who's using a Nostr client, if they want to see the messages written by the purple person on the left, you can see that the purple person on the left has written to Curious DK relay, to Damus relay, and relay 1. You can see that the ostrich over here on the right is reading from the Damus relay. With all of that, you can see that it's a different structure and it requires different considerations around how deletion would work. You could have the case where one relay chooses to write or read from another relay. The protocol doesn't specify how that should work. At least I don't believe there's any spec that defines that. But they could choose to, like people who operate relays should conform to the protocol spec, but they could also do other stuff that they feel like doing. There's nobody who really controls them. And so if you wrote a message and relay 3 picked it up, even if your Nostr client told Curious DK to delete it, relay 3 may already have read it from Curious DK, and relay 3 may not receive the delete event or may not choose to respect the delete event. And so in Nostr, different from a service like Twitter, you have to be comfortable knowing that once you publish something, you have to assume it's permanent record. Now, maybe there are ways you could try to really expunge it, but I think it's going to be tricky to have any strong guarantee that that has happened. So let me know if you have other questions about how Nostr works, and we'll see you in an upcoming video.